The New York Knicks are the 2026 NBA champions. They deserved this championship a lot, as they ended the season with a 15-1 winning run. And I'm here to analyze the biggest reasons behind the New York Knicks championship and the reasons why the San Antonio Spurs have lost their first NBA Finals with this young core. But before that, let me just quickly remind you that you can find some extra basketball content in the description. There are some useful links you can click on, not only to have some extra basketball content, as I said, but also to support this page. But you can also support this page by becoming a premium member, or also, positively interacting with this video with a like, with a comment, some hype points, or whatever you want. You're free to do whatever you want with this video, with this channel. You can also subscribe to it, but it's up to you if you like this kind of content and you want to support this project. But we can get back to the real analysis, and I want to start with how the New York Knicks turned their playoffs around completely, I can say, with one major tactical move, which was having Karl-Anthony Towns act as a primary ball handler at the top of the key. His passing skills are way underrated, in my opinion, so it was a brilliant move. And this was also the move that made the Sacramento Kings, also coached at the time by the same Mac Brown that he's coaching the New York Knicks at the moment, a real playoff team. They finished at the third spot in the Western Conference that season. They were eliminated in 7 games by the Golden State Warriors in that season, but having someone like Sabonis to handle the ball at the top of the key and utilize his passing abilities with the other 4 players around him moving off the ball and creating some kind of advantages was really the key to unlock an offensive power that was really effective at the time. And it was also really effective with Karl-Anthony Towns instead of Domantas Sabonis. As I said, Towns is a very underrated passer, but compared to Sabonis, he's also a way better shooter. So the other centers had to step outside of the paint to guard this type of action. So it was even more effective. But also Towns is better than Sabonis in attacking off the dribble. He is quicker. So it was really an enigma for the opposing defenses to game plan around this kind of player. But having Karl-Anthony Towns at the top of the key with the ball in his hands was also something that could allow Jalen Brunson to play more of the ball and to play more efficient type of basketball, rather than him isolating and playing static pick and rolls at the top of the key that most of the times led to other isolations and top shots. Jalen Brunson is a hell of a shot maker and is probably one of the best, if not the best, player in the whole world in isolation situations. But these are still isolation possessions, so they are not as effective and efficient as possessions played with the advantages created beforehand. So with off-ball movements, off-ball screens, and type of plays like this one. Players like Michael Bridges and OG Anunoby were way more involved into the action. They were not only corner shooters as they were when Brunson was isolating much. They were more involved in the off-ball actions, and this gave some great advantages to the Knicks offense, as the focal point of the offense was not a single player like Jalen Brunson anymore, but the defense was busy guarding multiple sources of offense, because now you have to guard Towns, you have to guard Brunson, you have to guard Bridges, you have to guard Anunoby. So not only Brunson in isolations, but multiple players. And on top of that, the impact of the bench in a lot of games was crucial for the New York Knicks. Jose Alvarado and Landry Shamet above all the other players, but also Mitchell Robinson, Miles McBride, Jordan Clarkson. In some games, their impact was very good for the team, and crucial for them to make some runs when both benches were on the court. So maybe at the beginning of the second quarter, at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and situations like these ones. So without the crucial role that the Knicks bench had throughout this playoff run, their success might not have been at least this with this big margin, because, as I said, the Knicks ended the season with a 15-1 winning run. So this was clearly a dominant run by the New York Knicks, and that's why I said that they clearly deserved this championship. New York had to do some things to bring the series on their side, and they were two in particular. The first one is, as I mentioned earlier, Karl-Anthony Towns being an enigma for the San Antonio Spurs defense. They tried putting Victor Wembanyama on him, but this way Wembanyama was lured out of the paint, and Wemby was not quick enough to contain Karl-Anthony Towns attacking him off the dribble, so he had an easy job attacking the French center on closeouts, and having the other four Knicks players playing on large empty spaces and having that much space to operate with without Wembanyama being at the center of the paint, ready to help on anyone, was a big advantage for New York. But Luke Cornett also could not make that great of a job in defending Karl-Anthony Towns. They also tried to put other players on Karl-Anthony Towns, such as Carter Bryant in some parts of the games, but also the forwards, Julian Champagny, and other rather big players, but quicker than Wembanyama. But obviously this did not work, as Towns is also very physical. He has some developed post-up game, and he's very skilled, especially on the offensive side. So this did not lead to something good, even with Wembanyama ready to help in the paint. Also because New York often plays with 5 shooters on the court, or maybe 4 and Josh Hart, but Hart proved to be at least a reliable shooter in these playoffs, especially in the final part of the series. So having Wembanyama to help on Karl-Anthony Towns and the mismatch that was created by the Spurs defense meant leaving someone open, and that could be Josh Hart, but also Michael Bridges, OG Anunoby, Miles McBride, Alvarado, or some other Knicks players. And the other tactical move, I introduced it talking about the previous one, but it was putting OG Anunoby in the corner, in the strong side corner, when Wemby was roaming off of the strong side corner player. The French center did so also in the series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, but OKC didn't put anyone reliable in the three-point shooting in the corners. They put Chet Holmgren in some situations. They sometimes put even Jalen Williams when he played, but Jalen Williams is not a reliable spot-up three-point shooter. He's a good shooter of the dribble, but not in catch-and-shoot situations, in my opinion. But also, it is something testified by the statistics. They did not play with Isaiah Joe much. They had Jared McCain helping Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, often double-teamed. So he was one pass away from SGA, usually at the top of the key, so he couldn't be in the corner. And players like Caruso, but also Dort, and obviously Hartenstein is not a shooter, but they are not reliable and consistent three-point shooters that you can put in the corner to punish this type of help. And it was the same with Josh Giddey when the Oklahoma City Thunder lost their previous playoff series before this season against the Dallas Mavericks. And in that occasion too, Sean Sweeney was the assistant coach that designed the defense that had the job to neutralize this Oklahoma City Thunder offense. So in this series, New York had the personnel to counter this particular move made by Mitch Johnson. So they put OG Anunoby most of the times in the corner to punish this kind of helps. And on the other side, Mitch Johnson couldn't really adapt and adjust to the type of games that came out of this series. And he was one of the two main reasons why the San Antonio Spurs lost this finals series. And these two reasons are also, in my opinion, the reasons why Victor Wembanyama haven't won the title. And if these reasons will keep staying with Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs, they will probably cost Wembanyama other titles. But this is, again, just my opinion. But the first one is, as I said, Mitch Johnson. His hyper aggressive defense with blitzes, with traps, and with other kind of aggressive coverages were not that effective. Helping this much, having someone to roam inside of the paint with a man-to-man defense. And as I said, the blitzes and the traps gave immediate advantages to the New York Knicks, but also to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but they did not have the correct personnel to attack this kind of advantages, since they do not have a secondary ball handler, especially with AJ Mitchell and Jalen Williams out of the series. It was different with the New York Knicks, because the Knicks have some really good decision makers. We've seen some really beautiful possessions in this series with the ball moving quickly, players attacking the closeouts really well and making the right read, the correct decision. So giving these early advantages to a team like the New York Knicks, so giving them the advantage to play a 4 against 3 type of basketball, is something that you obviously pay against this kind of team. But Mitch Johnson's mistakes were also beyond the tactical part, because Carter Bryant was not utilized as much as I would have done personally. I'm a big fan of this player, and I think that he's ready to play at the highest level, even now that he's still a rookie. Also because the rotations of the San Antonio Spurs were really short, and 6 players, so the starting lineup, and Dylan Harper had to play most of the minutes, and in the long run it was detrimental for the San Antonio Spurs, because they usually started the games really well with some scoring runs and some toughness, some remarkable efforts, but in the long run, as the time went by in the games, they started to lose some effectiveness, and they started to play a more, lazy kind of basketball with much more isolations and less ball movement. So having some players like Carter Bryant to make the rotations longer for the team, and having someone to rest some more minutes on the bench could have been, in my opinion, a solution. Also because I think that Carter Bryant has a better impact on a basketball court than Keldon Johnson, for example. I know that he is the 6th man of the year, but I think that for the type of series that came out of this finals series, Carter Bryant was a very reliable player that could have played much more minutes. But it was not only a problem with Carter Bryant in the rotations, since how Mitch Johnson managed the minutes of Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox, but not only the minutes, but also the possessions, was, in my opinion, very wrong. Dylan Harper deserved much more minutes than De'Aaron Fox, and De'Aaron Fox deserved much less minutes in general, not only compared to Dylan Harper. Fox struggled a lot in this final series, but it is something that we will see later. Dylan Harper, despite him being a rookie too, had a huge impact on basically every single game of this final series. But just like he had a great impact in the last series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, he deserved a lot more minutes, also because he was more of a leader than De'Aaron Fox, because the team played way better with Dylan Harper on the court rather than De'Aaron Fox. So, other than Harper and Bryant being rookies, I honestly don't know why their minutes were so cut short in this final series. But whichever are the reasons of these decisions, I do not agree with them. But also keeping Julian Champagnie off the court on some important parts of the games, such as the final minutes, was, in my opinion, wrong, because Mitch Johnson in some parts understood that Dylan Harper had to play, but Dylan Harper had to play with Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, and Victor Wembanyama, while Mitch Johnson opted for a three-guard lineup with Harper, Fox, and Castle, with then Vassell as the power forward and Wembanyama as the center, and keeping Julian Champagnie off the court in these moments was, in my opinion, not a good choice, because you obviously lose some physicality playing with three guards and one small forward, basically with Victor Wembanyama, but you also lose some key components of the lineup. Julian Champagnie is a hell of a glue guy and someone that can punish some type of defensive coverages, with him being a threat, especially in the corners outside of the perimeter. So having someone like Fox is completely different from him, also because Fox is not that good off the ball. So there is only one basketball on the court, so you can either give it to Dylan Harper, De'Aaron Fox, or Stephon Castle. And while Stephon Castle can do something off the ball, Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox are two players that give their best when they have the ball in their hands. So it was not a particularly smart decision, in my opinion. But the things that Mitch Johnson didn't do well in this final series don't end here, because how we managed the advantages during the games and the final possessions of the games are, in my opinion, crazy. They were full of isolation plays, not with Wemby, which would be the logical decision in my opinion, but with De'Aaron Fox, who shot poorly throughout the entire series. So it was something that I couldn't understand much. But even before Game 5, Mitch Johnson even came to talk to the press conference and said once again, I want to keep trusting Fox in the final possessions of the next game. And this was probably the worst decision, not only because De'Aaron Fox played some really questionable possessions at the end of the games in this series, but also because you tell the other players and the other coach what you will do in the final and most crucial possessions of a final game. And you also tell everybody that you will keep playing isolations in these parts of the games. And this was a complete disaster, in my opinion, on every point of view with these words. So every time that the Spurs went up by 12, 14, 16, even almost 30 points in Game 3, if I'm not mistaken, or Game 4, I don't clearly remember at the moment, but every time that the Spurs went up in the score, they started playing some stagnant iso ball that had basically no benefits for the team. So it was almost as bad as how Mitch Johnson and his coaching staff managed the timeouts in this series. They were called not in the best possible moments of the games, and Mitch Johnson overall seemed kind of lost and couldn't figure out what to do at the right time in this series. But it's not only that, it's also the fact that we've seen very few adjustments, not only in this series, but also in the previous series. Johnson had a game plan and he stick to it, as he also said with even Garo Fox and his isolations. He stick to it throughout all the games and throughout all the periods of the games. So once Mike Brown figured out some adjustments during the games, he basically couldn't respond. So once the Spurs were up and Mike Brown figured out some ways to attack the Spurs defense in that particular game, Mitch Johnson couldn't respond, and he could only watch his team slowly lose the advantage created, especially in the first quarters of the series. Another tactical aspect that I didn't understand about Mitch Johnson and his coaching staff is the fact that they preferred to utilize Wemby roaming off a corner player who could easily be a corner shooter like OG Anunoby, but we are in 2026 and in the NBA there are a lot of corner specialists. So this is not something that you can do for a long period of time, especially in the modern era in NBA, but they utilized Victor Wembanyama roaming in the paint off the corner man, and that required also a lot of communication and also some chances to mess up the communications, because the French center had to communicate basically in the entire possession always, because the opposing players are moving off the ball, so the corner players switches a lot in their positions, and so it was a lot of work of communication. And also the more you communicate, the more there is a chance that you can mess up the communication, and that is the basic principle that every coach knows, and that's why your offense has to be multifaceted and complicated, we can say, in order to make the defense communicate poorly, create an advantage, and then capitalize on this advantage. It is really basic basketball at this point. But getting back to the real tactical point, in my opinion, playing some zone coverage, like just a 2-3 zone that a lot of teams in the NBA typically utilize, could have been much better, because with that zone coverage, Wembanyama could have stayed in the paint, not having to deal with a lot of communication and not having to close out on the perimeter very far from the basket. And this way, players like OG Anunoby would have not been that open from outside of the three-point arc. But in general, attacking a zone defense that moves well, especially with someone like Wembanyama inside of the paint, is not easy at all. And this would have worked probably much better than playing a man-to-man coverage with someone rolling in the paint. This was something really difficult to understand from Mitch Johnson, and I hope to see Wembanyama in zone coverages a lot more than what we did in these playoffs. But the biggest tactical disaster by Mitch Johnson was probably concentrated in one single possession, and it was the last possession of Game 4, with Jalen Brunson that receives the ball at the top of the key. He was already guarded by Victor Wembanyama, so not a small player or someone that cannot guard Jalen Brunson, but De'Aaron Fox, a player much smaller than Victor Wembanyama, came to double team Jalen Brunson, so he came to concede an advantage to the Knicks because, as I said, if two players are on the ball, it means that there is a 4 against 3 type of advantage for the New York Knicks, not only before the shot, but also in box outs and in rebounds. So Jalen Brunson missed the shot, and the man that should have been guarded by De'Aaron Fox, who was OG Anunoby, was not boxed out by anyone because Fox had to bring the double team on Jalen Brunson, and Anunoby could tap the ball in and win Game 4, which was probably the most crucial game of this series because, if the Spurs win it, they go 2-2 and they come back to their home. So it's a completely different series that going down 3-1, especially with a game lost when you were leading by 29 points in the third quarter. So it was a very, very bad decision. Let's now talk about the second factor that led the Spurs to lose the series, and it obviously is De'Aaron Fox. The way he managed the ball was very poor, in my opinion. How he managed the final possessions of the games in this series was maybe even worse. He seemed very isolated from the rest of the team. The team played way better with Dylan Harper instead of him on the court. So he couldn't involve his teammates a lot in the offensive possessions, and he didn't give the leadership that he was asked to give in this final series. So, as I said before, to fix this kind of problems, the only thing that Mitch Johnson should have done was simply to put Dylan Harper instead of De'Aaron Fox. But it is, a strong decision because De'Aaron Fox has a certain status in the league and Dylan Harper is just a rookie. So I think that Mitch Johnson wasn't brave enough to take this decision. But if you want to coach at the highest level and if you want to win an NBA final, you have to take some brave decisions, just like Mike Brown did with taking the ball off Jalen Brunson's hands to unlock the full potential of this Knicks offense. So there will be a problem with De'Aaron Fox and the San Antonio Spurs, also because Fox recently signed a contract extension, which was very lucrative and very long. So it could be a problem in the long term for the San Antonio Spurs, also because Dylan Harper will obviously require some more possessions and minutes starting from next season. So it will be a problem that the San Antonio Spurs will have to handle carefully, in my opinion. But what's important is that the New York Knicks has won their first NBA championship in 53 years. Jalen Brunson is the Finals MVP. Maybe Karl-Anthony Towns and OG Anunoby deserved a little bit more than Jalen Brunson the Finals MVP award, but it is not undeserved at all. Jalen Brunson played some incredible playoffs. He also scored 45 points in Game 5, so he was decisive. He was crucial in many aspects for his team. And starting from now, I think that the New York Knicks will become even more dangerous because they will play without a lot of pressure. And this is a core that is really strong even in their chemistry. So they will be tough to eliminate in the playoffs even in the next year, despite the Eastern Conference probably getting better starting from next season, since the Indiana Pacers will be back with Tyrese Haliburton, but also with Ivica Zubac. The Boston Celtics will be back with Jason Tatum 100% healthy, and maybe with some more additions to the team. But on the other end, also the San Antonio Spurs will come back more experienced, also because there are not many teams in the history of the NBA that have won on their first real try in the NBA playoffs. So this will serve as a lesson, as also Wembanyama said in the press conference after Game 5. They'll come back stronger, but in my opinion, as I said before, they have to get rid of Mitch Johnson to replace him with a better coach, especially because Sweeney will become the head coach of the Orlando Magic. So they have lost an important piece of the coaching staff. So they will need someone that can have a very big impact on the games, on the tactical side, on the adjustments, on the rotations, and on every point of view. And they have to at least limit De'Aaron Fox's minutes to let Dylan Harper play more. The Western Conference as well would be really tough to win because the Denver Nuggets will be back, maybe with other players around Nikola Jokic. The Oklahoma City Thunder are obviously a fantastic team, and even though they will lose maybe Luguentz-Dort or maybe even Hartenstein, they are very tough to play against. And then there are some other teams that can be really dangerous in the playoffs. The Lakers, the Rockets, the Minnesota Timberwolves. So next season, but the next seasons in general, will be really exciting to see, in my opinion. So stay tuned for more basketball content that will also continue in this summer. There are a lot of things to analyze, not only with the free agent market that will open in July, but also with the NBA draft that will take place in the next weeks. There are some coaches' systems to analyze this summer, and there are the FIBA competitions to see this summer. And I will post something on my Instagram page that you can find among the useful links in the description. If you want to see the next big prospects that will probably go in the NBA draft in the next years, I will follow that too. So there are many things to do in this summer. I'm very excited to continue with this amazing project and to keep sharing content with my amazing community that I do not thank enough for the great support that they're giving me. But I'm very grateful for every single positive interaction that I have with the people that appreciate my content, my ideas, and that are part of this big community. And with all that said, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.